So this is how far I usually take in VR. Uh, I try not to get carried away and trying to polish this too much. I have been modeling 3D characters for over 17 years now, and my workflow has been relatively the same for most of the time. A few years back, I first tried to sculpting in VR, and I hated it at first. But the more I tried, the more I liked it. It took me a few different apps, few different attempts, and now I try to start most of my characters in VR. I think I really like using the pen for polishing and for doing the second half of the conceptual sculpture with the pen, but I really enjoy doing the first half in VR, just like getting the shapes there, getting the size, the proportion, even if those change afterwards, because the way you see things in VR, it feels more natural, but at the same time, when you bring it to a flat screen, it feels a lot different than what you see in VR. So a lot of those things end up changing. But I really enjoy having the blocking aspect done in VR. My tool of choice for that has been Adobe Substance Modeler. Medium feels very similar, so and it's free. So, but I pay for the Adobe package anyways, the Substance package because of work. So, like, yeah, I need Substance Painter for client work, so might as well get pay a little bit extra and get this tool that I really like. But if you don't need Painter, I wouldn't pay all that just for Modeler. I don't think it's worth it. So I just want to share with you how I go by what's my process for blocking characters in VR. So I think the main reason why I didn't like sculpting VR when I first tried was because I was trying to sculpt with the clay tool, just dropping clay strokes everywhere, and it wasn't very controllable. Felt like sculpting with whipped cream. Um, Now what I'm trying is just to drop a single sphere. So I get the clay tool, I select the sphere, I click on single. You can just do a small stroke, but usually I keep using this tool over and over, just dropping little pieces of clay here and there. So I just place single instead of pressure or whatever. And then I get the move brush. I get the radius of influence really small there. You see like the radius of the brush is really big. By pressing up on the right hand, you get the size of the brush itself. And there is like between those two spheres that you see on my brush, it's the radius of influence is like the fall off, and right and left on the stick is gonna make it go grow or reduce. So I do the fall the inner sphere really small and the outer sphere a lot bigger. That way it's a very soft fall off. And when I'm dropping the first, back in the day when I first started sculpting like this, um, I, I was trying to get the whole face from the first sphere, and that's one thing that VR changed on the way I sculpt everywhere. Now I try to get one, like, break up the face in multiple elements and treat each element of the face as its own geometry, as its own lump of clay. Uh, in Adobe, in Substance Modeler, I tend to do that as different layers. So it's hard not to push the chin all the way down to actually get the face shape, but I'm trying to to treat it like the top side of the skull, and just pushing around and massaging it, trying to look at the reference as much as possible, but not really getting too concerned about that, because I gotta remind myself this is just a blocking and everything's gonna change afterwards. So here you see me getting the clay brush again, and you see that I just drop a single sphere and back to the move brush I go, and I'm treating that like a separate lump of clay, same as if I was dealing with like any traditional media. Um, and I just repeat the process over and over. So now, In Modeler is really easy to select the layer. You just press, I think it's up on the left joystick, and then you press a button on the layer that you want to sculpt, and you keep going. One thing that I don't really like is not having the option of seeing the outliner, a list of all the layers, but I gotta give them that it's really intuitive to actually select the layers on the viewport instead of by name. And let's be honest, naming things in VR, it's a nightmare. Like the when I use Quill, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is having to type things in VR. I wish VR has better voice recognition by now, or even Windows. I don't know. Like Oculus should figure out better voice recognition when you're trying to type shit in VR. And you can tell that I did a full box, sorry, a full sphere for the jawline and another one for the chin. I just think this guy has like such a distinctive jawline with the chin popping out like its own element. So I that's what I chose to do. And even though I am dropping new elements, I keep bouncing between the elements that I have and just moving them independently. And keeping having that separation actually helps a lot to have to find the shapes that I want. And I know it doesn't look good right now, but you gotta trust me. At some after you're done with blocking all the elements and you merge everything together, it's a lot easier to make things look smoother than if you were just like with a clay brush and ZBrush the whole time. Uh, this is actually the thing that dropping the ears with a single sphere as well. Uh, to be fully honest, I started doing that in ZBrush. That was the first facial element that I started separating as a new tool in ZBrush instead of having it instead of trying to sculpt with like just extracting from the same shape. I started using a sphere to start and I loved it. And then after I started using VR for sculpting, I started doing the same for the nose and for the eyes. And then pretty soon I was doing even the mouth and the eyebrows and everything. So uh, here we go, doing the nose, same thing, dropping one sphere there and moving around. I think in this case I did a separate layer for the nostrils as well. Um, which is not always the case for me, depends on the style that I'm going for, but in this case I think it helped. And even for the mouth, I drop one shape, I duplicate, I hide it after I form the muzzle area. I duplicate the shape, I cut half off in one and the other half on the other, and that's how I get the lips started. So everything is based on putting new clumps of material and and shaping that to what I want instead of trying to get uh, the forms by with brush strokes, because that's I don't think that's the most clean and efficient way, and also it's a lot harder to do that in VR than in a traditional sculpting too. Um, as soon as I start to recognize the character that I'm trying to make, I tend to ignore the face, pull the brakes, move on to the body, start blocking the body, because the body language, the body shape is gonna influence how the proportions of the face need to be, how I see that as well. So it's important to me not to push the face too far before having the rest of the body. So when I'm like semi happy with the face, I already try to push forward and do another round of polishing the face still in VR after I have the body kind of established. So after I block the torso and I start dropping arms and legs, I tend to duplicate the previous layer instead of creating a new clay lump for each one. And I don't know, just something that it seems to be a little bit easier, more organic that way, because there is already some shape to to the farm, so I don't need to reshape from scratch for the long tubular parts, especially. So by that I mean like I drop in the arm area and then I duplicate that for the forearm, and then afterwards I do the same for the legs. I just duplicate the forearm and make the thighs and duplicate that again to make the calves. So yeah, it's definitely not the same shape, but it helps me just having some form there already, not having to uh, start from sphere all the time. It's kind of nice. So after I have all the elements represented on the viewport, like fingers, feet, the entire body is there, I come back and I start adding eyes and other elements to the face that I kind of decided not to do earlier. And for the eyes, I will also do like one sphere for the eyeball itself, and a couple new clay stripes for each eyelid, and each eyelid is separate right now. And then I end up pushing the skull a little bit around. Sometimes I try to get the brow area as part of the main sphere. In this case, wasn't looking right, so I just pushed that in and dropped another sphere to push the eyebrows around a little bit better. And I think that worked. And now I have pretty much all the elements there, so it's just a matter of adjusting sizes and shapes and pushing things a little bit here and there. I could call this done, but I was having fun, so I just kept pushing and pushing and trying to get it a little bit closer to the reference before I moved into the to working with the pen. And when I get the pen out and I start actually sculpting more the way I'm used to, uh, so far I have been doing that mostly in ZBrush, but after Maxon bought ZBrush and start charging us again, because I bought my license of ZBrush 10 years ago and I never had to pay for any upgrades. So I don't think Maxon did anything of relevance after they acquired ZBrush, and I still using it for especially for client work, but for personal work I've been trying to use the iPad and Nomad Sculpt. I think kind of it's a good break from my computer as well. It just puts me like I can sculpt on the couch with the kids, or uh, I don't know, just in a different environment helps me focus a little bit more. I tend to get a little bit more focus using either VR or the iPads when I open ZBrush. I think I'm too used to this space. I'm too used to the. It's very easy for me to get distracted on my desktop, so I try to move away from it when I can. So this is how far I usually take in VR. I try not to get carried away and trying to polish this too much. I could start dropping more muscle groups here and try to isolate that a little bit better, but to be honest, that's the point where I draw the line and I start actually sculpting those with a pen. As long as the silhouette is more or less what I'm looking for. And again, everything might change still. It's just a blocking phase, but I'm enjoying this process a lot more than any other process that I've tried so far. So uh yeah. So next week I'm gonna try to post a video of how I do the next step, where it's pretty much the taking like merging those parts together and sculpting in Nomad instead of ZBrush.